So some of us in the community and others here have been asked to share during these BBCs about living the Vinaya. And so I'm going to share some things today. But first I wanted to thank Venerable Wu Yin, Venerable Chodron, and Venerable Jindi for all of your guidance and support and kindness. So before I moved to the Abbey, I had probably only talked to 2 Buddhist monastics in my life. And so everything I've learned living here. And when we first had the Abbey, the only monastic was Venerable Chodron. So it wasn't exactly like having a bunch of trees that you grow up straight in. It was, so what I'm going to reflect is my own experience. And I see that more as the conditions were having enough faith in Venerable Chodron's vision, maybe not absolute faith, but enough faith as it unfolded. And then her continuous effort in teaching us about the monastic mind. And then I also want to say that everyone who has ordained here, and we, even before the Abbey started, we have received tremendous support from monastics, from Venerable Chodron as our abbess, from many monastics who have visited here and have talked to us and given us guidance, and from many monastics from afar. And for many years, we've benefited from all of this. So this is, I would say, the basis of our experience here. So just speaking personally, the first conversation I had when I actually moved here, one of the things Venerable Chodron talked to me about was the need to be transparent. And I actually see that as, for years I saw that as kind of a genius thing to keep you as a teacher from getting into trouble, amongst other things. But I'm not going to speak about it from that viewpoint. And so what did that mean? Well, we call it our faults, but I usually think of these more as all of our mistakes of body, speech, and mind, and to be able to reveal those. And for myself, that has been according to my own awareness, which has sometimes been lacking, and my own abilities, which has sometimes been lacking and sometimes not. You know, all those things are things that we develop. And before moving here, as many of us were students with Venerable Chodron, we had learned about purification and done practices daily in purification. But those had always been solitary. And as one Geshe told me, you know, at least on your own cushion, behind your closed door, be honest with yourself, you know, about yourself, about your mind, body, your speech, everything. And through that experience and the teachings and guidance we received, many of us I would say have experienced some kind of psychological healing even, you know, more understanding of ourselves and healing of things. But transparency as a community, and especially as we started doing the posada, it takes on some added features, I would say. It takes this kind of self-examination in a further direction. And it's because we're sharing with others. And so I think most people here would say that both transparency and harmony, transparency and harmony have been like the heart of the community here at Sravasti Abbey. And now, over the years, as we have 4 fully ordained monastics and more, these have now been formalized in these Vinaya rites, which the Buddha made. And in reflecting about this, I'm surprised how seamlessly this developed. It just naturally flowed from the teachings that you gave us about the monastic mind into doing these rites. It was just seamless. And so first I want to talk before about the rites. I want a little bit about that. I want to talk more about just monastic community life. So as the people in the community here have noticed, as well as some of our long-term friends who knew us way before we moved here even, the rock tumbler works. People grow. Everyone here grows. And I want to say that for myself, faith only takes you so far in that. So, of course, in community life, many things come up, and the grass can look greener on the other side, right? You can always, your mind can go here and there. And what is that? That is the mind of discontent. And so it needs to be recognized. And of course, that kind of mind has an unpleasant feeling to it, which leads to aversion and even anger. And so what do we do when that tension comes up? Do we run? How do we handle that tension? And so early on, it was very clear to me that wherever I go, I take my mind with me. And now it's more clear that I also take my habits and my karma. And so years ago, I met a physician. So, of course, he had some money, right? He was elderly, and he had been working his whole life. He was still working. And he and his first wife got divorced over a $5 bill. And so he told me this story to teach me. And I often say this to myself when my mind gets upset about something. Am I going to get divorced over a $5 bill? You know, how ridiculous. And then my mind goes to, why not stay where all the conditions are so perfect for growth? And so this is how I work with my mind, for the mind of discontent. That's one little flavor, and that kind of theme has run in my mind for years. Another thing I wanted to share about community life is, years ago, Venerable she often gives us articles to read and this and that. And one time she gave us this story about this commander of some explorers. And I don't know where they were going, but they had a ship. And wherever the land they landed on, the commander sunk their ship so they couldn't go back. He wanted to reduce their options so their minds wouldn't be weak. And so this allowed his explorers to go forward with all of their effort. And this is what I think about sometimes when I think about the different options that we have as monastics, and the mind that wants to look where the grass is greener on the other side. And more recently, I use this kind of thought about options to finally, I don't think I always understood what Venerable was how she was directing me. But I think finally, what I'm coming to is that the decisions I'm going to make about things I want to do and this and that, I have to ask myself, is this going to reduce my afflictions? This is like the bar that I feel I need to look at this point in terms of the decisions of how I spend my time. And why do I ask myself that? And I think it's from Venerable Losang and I give motivations to each other often in the morning practice. And something he said from Shantideva helped me to understand that I think that this resonates with me, that I'm more aware of the attachment I have to the causes of my own suffering. We are attached to the causes of our suffering. And this leads us into all kinds of trouble. And so as a monastic community, we have safeguards against this, and we have rites, and we have procedures, and we have the support of the community life to help us in this way. And some things that Thich Nhat Hanh said about community life, I think, kind of express this, of how we learn, how the rock tumbler works. And that is that we benefit from each other's strengths. And we also learn from each other's weaknesses. And as a group, we can see the strong and weak points of each member. And so this thing of transparency helps us to both learn compassion, but it also leads to a kind of a collective insight where there's a lot of strength and vitality and wisdom. And this is, I think, a defining thing of a monastic community that might be different from other communities. Another thing he says, which comes up in community life, is receiving either praise or admonition. If we respond to these with pride and our ego being stroked or whatever, we won't learn anything or progress. He says, we need to hear the truth about ourselves as others see it. And I think this doesn't mean we have to believe what they say, But through that, we can think for ourselves, how do we take the interactions that happen with others? We do need to see ourselves as others see us, if only to understand our impact on others, if nothing else. But oftentimes we're blind to our own faults, so we need each other to support each other in actually understanding ourselves and growing. So in that sense, something that Venerable Chodron said many years ago is that anything that comes up, it's like there's no pride and no shame, like the unhealthy shame. We just make mistakes, or we just do things and they go well. You know, we don't need to have pride about anything. It doesn't help us. And we don't need to have an unhealthy shame about anything. And when you live with others because they know all your faults and all your strengths, these kind of things come up, especially in the first years. I mean, just ask anyone who's just lived here for a year or two how fun that is to adjust to. So this is not unusual. I think any monastic community that functions in the way we do would go through this and has. So I just want to speak a little bit now about the rites of the Buddha. The first thing that really struck me was when I took my novice ordination here. And it was just the kindness of the Buddha to have a guide, and the guide helping you through this procedure. And it's really reflective also about some things I've read in the Visuddhimagga, where he was teaching the bhikkhus about the charnel grounds and how to stay away from the draft of the charnel grounds, like approach it from the other side. Just this compassion of the Buddha. And I think that energy of the Buddha teaching the bhikkhus in that way, that's the same compassion I felt when the guide is helping you with your ordination, and the people who are putting the ordination together and doing everything for you. Everyone's there. The Sangha is pulling together to help you. And that was apparent to me in terms of the first experience I had of the rites, the Vinaya rites. So that helps, these rites help us as an individual with our afflictions, to help us to progress in the path, and they help us as a community. They help to guide the community life. But when you first meet them, at least when I did, when you're reading them and, we're going to do these rites and they're new to us, they don't really come alive very much when you read them. It's actually when you live them and when you do them and you experience them. And so sometimes, like when we start the Varsa, you can be quite inspired about just the ceremony and the beauty of it. And there's a point in there where we say, and we're just, you can be filled with this appreciation for the opportunity we have as a monastic. And then we say, may this situation come about for all sentient beings. And it's just so moving. It's the lived experience, of, doing the pasada and listening to others, having to reveal things in front of others and learning how to accept their compassion and have more self-acceptance, and even the non-judgmental response that is usually elicited. Because when we do pasada, it's a time where everyone in a busy community is all focused in the same way. And it's just a very beautiful time for listening to each other. It's the best time for us to bring up some of the things that we need to discuss as a community. And this is when we confess to each other, so we can really listen to each other and come to understand each other. And that helps us, I think, to all grow. So I love the level of focus that happens on that day with that rite. And so just to close, I'll just share a little story. So we built this building behind us, Gotami, with a very good builder, but a very poor bookkeeper. His bookkeeper wasn't very good. And every month we had these invoices. And every month she made a lot of mistakes on the invoices. And so I didn't know much about this stuff, and I carried forward the mistakes month after month. And then by the end of that building project, it was a big mess. It was just a big mess financially. We actually came out ahead in the end, but it was so chaotic that we didn't work with that builder again, because just even though financially we ended up ahead because I was tracking the money on it, it just was chaotic. And it caused a lot of disharmony. And so then in this building, we put in the contract that we don't pay a dime or a penny until the invoice is worked out. So 14 times the builder and I got together every month, and we didn't look forward to this. And we hammered out, like, usually about 6 things that we didn't agree on. And then we would go forward every month with a very positive attitude. Like, we're both kind of positive people trying to work together as a team. We had that kind of energy, and we just wouldn't enjoy this meeting, and then we'd come out of that and we'd go forward for the next month. And it was just really, really beautiful the way that energy was able to carry forward through the stresses of things that come up naturally in construction. And this I see as our pasada every 2 weeks. It's similar. We clean the slate every 2 weeks. We purify and we confess, and we get to start over. And we, our vows are pure, and we go forward, and we don't let this accumulate for days and months and years, and then it's our personality, and then we just distill that way, right? And so I think this is one of the things that I find most beautiful about doing this pasada every 2 weeks with the group. So those are just some reflections.